Hey everybody, Alex Cohen here. Welcome to the latest edition of the Inside the Issues podcast. My co-host, Sara Sadhwani, is away at Harvard University this week, but I'm really stoked because we have with us here instead GOP strategist, fundraiser, badass extraordinaire. Fundraiser, Anne Hyde Dunsmore. Anne, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, always.
I am so stoked to talk to you this week. There's so much to talk about. There is like 1,000,001 huge GOP events that are coming our way in the near future. We also are going to talk about this third-party business that is brewing out there and some really interesting potential voting changes in your neck of the woods in Orange County. But first, Anne, I just want to give folks a chance to get to know you. I find you to just be such a fascinating person on so many levels. We met during the 2008 election cycle. I was at NPR at the time, and I just remember just being so fascinated by the work that you did, and especially how you got involved in politics. I don't want to take too long, but you were working in the restaurant business. How do you go from point A to point B being politics?
Okay, so I lost a bet. And I lost a bet in a bar that I was managing. It was a restaurant on the Senate side. And so after work, all the staffers would come over. And, of course, they made a bet. And the loser had to volunteer 20 hours a month for the presidential campaign of their choice. And then that was in 1978. And they were all Kennedy staffers. And so my stepfather said, who was in the public affairs business, said, you need to just go visit each campaign, because I was fairly politically agnostic.
Yeah.
As an Asian studies major, I had zero.
Me too!
Woo!
Wow, that's crazy. Who knew?
Okay.
Another sister from another mister.
Anyways, I lost, and I wound up, once I got to George Bush for president, I never left, and I quit my job managing, and I took a waitressing job at night, and I was a full-time volunteer, and
here you are.
And here we are.
Yeah.
And somehow I wound up in fundraising, because once the elections were over, there wasn't really anything else to do. But prior to that, I was heading into the journalism area.
So fascinating.
So I worked in press on the presidential campaign.
And we should let our listeners and viewers know, just for a little bit of context, you were kind of the driving force between the recall campaign against Gavin Newsom, which I have a feeling is going to come up in all of this. But before we go any further, Anne, as a newcomer to this pod, we do a little something every week called What's the Word? And I thought this week, given all the things we're going to talk about, the word should be party, because you are a fundraiser. I mean, there's that sense of the word party.
Fun.
But there's
it's
also,
fun.
Right? It is fun.
No. Yeah.
There's political parties. And when you started in this business, there's always been smaller parties, other parties out there, agnostics, as you put it. But, we've come from the system where it's been Democrats and Republicans and blue and red for so long. And now here in California, the largest growing voting bloc is down with NPP. It's no party preference.
Correct.
So, and you just this week, I think, participated in this focus group.
I didn't participate in it. We commissioned it.
Yeah.
And it's and it's funny because you go to work with pollsters and they go, now what do you want? What answers do you want to get out? I mean, and I said, I just want to know the truth.
Yeah.
I don't want to be leading about it or anything like that. And we wanted to know about this 30% and growing, and in some cases surpassing Republican registration, no party preference. Not to be confused with declined estate, also known as DTS.
Yeah, or independent.
Or independent. By the way, it's independent party. It's not just independent. So even the consultants, who've been around forever, sort of lumped them all into one category. And I said, I think you're wrong. And this is something that I learned from the recall and watching sort of Republican reaction to Trump and also Democrat reaction to the far left. And you know how I feel about the middle. I think the middle is the key. And that's where solutions will be found.
Yeah. So okay. I think we should just now
I can go off. And
no. I think it's really important and to know what NPP, no party preference, is. You see, what is the official definition?
So I'm going to just tell you, it's no party preference. But, and it's not how I see it. What I wanted to know is what am I looking at? So I want to get rid of any presuppositions here, or suppositions. But What it wound up being was exactly what I kind of figured. Not what I hoped for. I didn't have any hopes, but it was basically people saying, the question was, are you intentionally no party preference, or was it just sort of a lazy reaction to having to check a box? That wasn't the exact question, but it was along those lines.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, intentional. And so we found these people to be incredibly specific about their lack of interest in the two-party system. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, they hate it. Mm-hmm. And they feel it's the biggest obstacle to solutions because the gap between the two parties is growing and growing and growing, that the middle ground isn't there, so they're filling it.
Can you, I just got to jump in here because what's really weird for me, Anne, is I know that these Californians are out there. I'm having trouble picturing them. Like usually if you say, oh, it's a group of, Orange County Republicans, I got a picture in my mind. Or this is a group of like East LA progressive.
You got the profiles all down. Yeah.
But I like literally, it's almost like, when you see those candidates, it's just like the black silhouette, and you have just no idea who they are. Like, can you describe for me generally gender breakdown, racial breakdown, age breakdown, income?
Yeah. So when you put together these focus groups, the intention of the focus group is to give you better guidance in how you conduct a poll, what questions to ask. Yeah. So you want to be very careful that you're statistically correct in that very basic group. So it was very diverse. It was probably mid-20s to early 70s. We did decide to split genders, which I actually, in hindsight, now go, okay, now I want to mix them and see who's driving the decision-making in a household between the women and the men. Because the men were more, sorry guys, but more sloth-like than the women were very intentional and very deliberate and very thoughtful. The men were kind of done. And they get their information from different sources. So back to your question, I think that if I were to say to you, middle America in California is who no party preference is, regardless of gender, regardless of income, and regardless of age. Now, the issues varied between the two. Yeah. But the outcome was really surprising. So maybe we'll leave that towards the end. But it shocked us.
No. I want it now. Outcomes now. And then I want to talk about issues.
Okay, so in the women's group, they all talked about abortion. Yeah. And by the way, I want to also say this. Nobody was disrespectful to each other. There was no screaming and yelling. There was no, how could you say that? There was none of that in either group. People were, they respectfully disagreed. You could see where they were like shrugging their shoulders at one person's response as opposed to going, I think that's crazy and you're a bully. It's a mean thing. None of that. So this is a world of people who agree to disagree. Yeah. And that's where we need to head. So that was comforting. But the women focused on immigration and abortion. Some hesitated to refer to it as abortion.
What they call it?
And they also spoke
reproductive rights?
Parental rights, individual rights, a right to the decision over your own body, but that applied to a number of different issues. Yeah. Your own family. And immigration was coming up a lot. Probably because of what's happening at the border, which only tells me they are paying attention to the news.
And not just what's happening at the border. I mean, there is bus after bus after bus arriving here in the Southland of immigrants from Texas. So, okay, so it's on immigration. Okay. What do they want?
So they feel that the Republicans have it right on immigration, which shocked the heck out of me. I was like, oh my God, we're the mean party. You're supposed to, hate us on immigration, and they didn't. They felt that a strong border was very important. They are starting to make the connection between crime and drug trade. And it is the biggest portal for crime is Southern California. The 5 corridor is on the planet the largest portal of crime in the world. So whether they know that or not, I don't know. But they are starting to make the connection. And the crime was there, but not as prevalent as discussing LGBTQ, as a discussion of abortion and immigration, and just the meanness of politics and the lack of solutions. So let's just I'm going to finish and we can go backwards if you want, but I'm sitting there listening to all of this going, oh my gosh, they're going to just crush Trump right at the end when we ask him the final question. And this was the final question. If you had to decide today between Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and Ron DeSantis, who would you pick? The women, except for one, said Trump. And I almost fell off my chair. And these are suburban women. This is the vote that the Republican Party lost. These are not women, like if they were under 30, they originally registered as no party preference. Yeah. And then others switched either from Republican or Democrat. And if they did switch from Republican, it had started in 2016. And that was in both genders. As opposed to the men, which is supposedly the over 40 men are the Republican vote, right? No, they're the Biden vote. When asked if, of course I had to throw this question in, which I couldn't get it in with the women, but I did get it in with the men. Does Gavin Newsom add to the ticket? And they're like, no, don't really know much about him, don't really care about him, I mean, it was just sort of a non-starter. And then there were a couple people who wanted to pick somebody else. And I think also the takeaway from the whole two-party system discussion, which went on for quite some time, mostly in the women's group, was that it doesn't offer up enough. It prevents us from really seeing the options and making a decision instead of between two horrible people, which is their words, not necessarily mine, but okay, and who they would really want, knowing that those two are going to wind up in that position. They also feel that corporate America and big money is ruling both parties. They also hate equally. They equally hate the far left and the far right. Different reasons, but far left and far right. Like if they're pro-choice, they're uncomfortable with the fact that it's been taken as far as it has. Now, whether they believe in 3 months, 6 months, postpartum was definitely off the table, and so was, there was no discussion about viability. Just that it's just gone a bridge too far.
So I'm so curious about what does all of this mean practically speaking? Like, what does this mean for candidates? Because it sounds like here's this big group, and here's what they want, and they want not this far and not this far and something much more down the middle. And yet when I try to think, I'm like, okay, who are the names? Who are the people? Someone like a former Assemblymember Chad Mays comes to mind, was a Republican, became no party preference, became, the independent.
He was actually independent,
yeah, right, because of the reaction to Trump. And now he's not in politics anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, and he's not the only, Kristen Olsen, I think of all these people who've said, I want to be this middle ground, but it's not like they've got this huge
They have not, and that was the big
behind.
concern. They recognize that as a problem. However, if that section of people, by the way, these people all vote. So they are active. They do make a decision. They won't pick a party. They don't want to be bullied, and that was a big discussion. Don't bully me on my decision to not pick a party. I want to pick a person.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I want to pick that person based on my feelings about issues at that point in time. And fairly consistently, and when we asked him, then what are your top 3 issues that would make you make that determination? And by the way, what was the major issue that made you leave the party structure? So we have to do a lot of polling on this, and I would really welcome the opportunity to come here and say, okay, last night, this is what happened.
Yeah.
But it's kind of disruptive news for the consultants. Yeah. It's very disruptive news for the candidates. And you know what? They have to change the lexicon of how things are discussed. One thing was very clear. If it's a party mailer, it's going to go straight in the trash when it comes to no party preference. Now, that flies in the face of some people's decisions in different parties, whether they're state and local. They think that they can go approach the no party preference voters and try and get them to change their registration.
Because and just so we should clarify here, because I keep thinking about the Republican Party in the primaries. If you're not registered as a Republican, you cannot vote for Donald Trump. Like, you have to actually be registered as a Republican.
Or you
in
can
the primaries.
request a special ballot.
Yeah, right. And who's going to do right? Like, and I'm wondering, as a Republican consultant, do you feel like the party is
dumbest
cutting
decision I've ever seen in my life?
Yeah, I was going to say cutting off the nose, but you can say dumbest decision
dumbest.
too.
Well, you know that little term you were laughing about all day long?
Yes. Anne said a word. It's the un-F word.
It's the
We won't say it. We'll be family friendly. Yeah. No. Okay. But you can't. You basically say, when I asked you about this, you said you cannot un-F yourself from that particular choice.
Undo that, no.
Yeah, undo. Yeah. That's another word.
But I like the other one better.
I know, I do too. But you know,
and we try to keep that decision, and I think it was a bad decision. I think the Republican Party is under fire for not being Big Tent enough, which tells me that people wish we were. Yeah. Because I think fiscally and on crime and clearly on the border, now people are voting about their safety and their quality of life and whatever that is at the time. Hey, remember last week I got upset because I woke up and it was $6 a gallon for gas. I drove by the same gas station today at $6.60. We're headed back to $7. Thank you, Gavin Newsom. And if anybody's wondering, he does have control over that. He can change it. He still has executive power. He will have executive power for the rest of his term. He's a king.
Okay, I know. Sorry. I know. We could go down the Gavin rabbit hole, but I want to come back to the Republicans and this big race that's coming up next year. And next week, we've got this debate that's happening at the Ronald Reagan Library. And I was out there recently, and it is beautiful. And it's interesting. They have this classroom there, and all of the walls are white. And, you know, on TV cameras, that doesn't work out at all. So literally, I was there as they were putting up the giant life-size Ronald Reagan posters. And it really, for me, I was like, it was a hit you on the head, right? Like, clearly the legacy of Reagan as the great communicator will be hanging over that event and hanging over that debate. But it is such a different style of rhetoric compared to what we're seeing today due to Donald Trump. And who will not be at that debate is going to be talking to auto workers in Michigan. So, like, talk to me about is that, I grew up in an era where everybody looked to Ronald Reagan as he was the man, he was the Republican, everyone tried to be just like him. And now I feel like he has been dropped like a hot potato for the Trump rhetoric.
Not intentionally, but I think just because it's been such a long time, and the current generation of politicians has no firsthand knowledge of Ronald Reagan, disturbing as that is, and aren't we all getting old? But I have one big message for anybody doing that, either advising or participating in that debate. You want to go be big, mean, and nasty? Don't bother talking to no party preference when it comes to getting your vote, getting their vote. Big, mean, and nasty and bully and all that implies won't fly with 30% of the vote. Yeah. How about that? And I think that's the thing I love about democracy. It may not happen quick enough for us, but because we want to see immediate results all the time. But I think that the lesson is going to be learned. The pendulum does swing in a democracy. Yeah. And you have to rely on that, love that, respect it, and continue to hope and pray for it.
You know what this kind of sounds like to me, Anne, is remember vinyl records, right? Mm-hmm. And then they're
coming back.
And they have come back, right? And it feels like that kind of middle of the road politics. It sounds like you're saying it's the same thing. Yeah, it went away for a while with CDs and MP3s and Apple playlists and whatnot. But there is something about the richness of that sound that people will have a hankering for,
but
and eventually it comes back.
It's also a comfort zone. It's a comfort zone. It's like, what do you, there's a reason there's something called comfort food. Well, there's a comfort in reason and familiarity when everything around you is run amok and gone, and to a point where you just have no idea how we got there, and it's the un-F word. And you begin to feel like it's not going to get better, that you will not see the things that you loved the way you loved them and for the reasons that you loved them and felt comfortable. And I think that's what we're starting to see. And for whoever wants to continue the vitriol, you are not helping this country. If you are not going to find solutions, don't run for office. don't stay in office, go away, leave us alone, and I don't care which party you're in, go away. Stop it.
Okay, but so, Anne, let's talk about the other big thing.
Yes.
The other big thing that's coming up this week, or next week rather, 2 days after the debate, is the kickoff of the California GOP convention in Anaheim.
Disneyland. Woo!
Okay, Anne,
right across the street from Disneyland.
Right, and let's just run it through. Donald Trump's going to be there doing a luncheon on Friday. You've got Tim Scott's coming, Vivek Ramaswamy is coming, Ron DeSantis is the headliner at dinner on Friday night.
Well, he might go be on monorail over at Disneyland. Maybe he's bringing the kids, and they're all going to go over there, right, and get the e-ticket ride.
Yeah.
Okay. No.
We've got a vinyl reference and an e-ticket reference. This episode goes out to everyone born before 1975. But Anne, I feel like we've talked about it here on the podcast that the Republican Party has just here in California has decided there's this now like all or nothing sweepstakes where if any one candidate, aka Donald Trump, gets more than a majority, like 50% plus one of the vote, all of our delegates will go to that candidate. It seems like you're saying don't go down this road, but the statewide party is doubling down, it seems like, on Trump. Why? And what do you think is going to be the impact of that? Because it's not just going to be president on that ballot. There's all these other key races, congressional races and Senate races and local races.
We're ground zero here. You know what? I mean, I've said this to you before. But, because of the New York redistricting and the court cases in the South, the chances of holding on to a majority in the House in this cycle is going to be very, very close to ineffable. Yeah. And that's not affable, by the way. I didn't say that.
Yeah. I said, what's the word as party? The F word probably should have been our word for the week.
And so for the rest of the year, next year included, I think that we have so many congressional races here that will be difficult to protect, and that's always the first priority. And then you move to open seats that are available, which we have like one that might lean Republican or be a viable race, and that's Scott Baugh's race down in Orange County. And then you have some challenges that may or may not work. I think because of redistricting, which has made the gap even closer, but that's hurt us as well. Like Ken Calvert's gap is now Mike Garcia's gap, and Valadeo is always going to be fighting for that seat. And it's turned a lot of our congressional seats are a lot like the Valadeo challenge. Yeah. He's got to work all the time to keep that seat. Duarte, a newcomer. So, if California could swing that gavel to the other side, and I think that we have a challenge with a lot of people were told if you want to be viable, don't go to that convention. That's kind of eased off now because of the number of candidates that are coming. I've never liked California as a winner-take-all state. I was a big advocate for a long time and actually tried to do a proposition on by congressional district. I think it gives more representation to people. I think anytime you make things smaller, not larger, and you bring it closer and closer to the people, it's better. I love states' rights. I love by congressional district. I'm not a winner-take-all person. I think it's really bad, and I think the party doing what they're doing is just making it worse.
And I want to pivot and talk a bit more about local politics and what I think is going to be. I think parental rights is going to be a huge one. I think immigration, as you said, is going to be a huge one. But I also think crime and safety, law and order is just going to be enormous. And a lot's happened on that front this week. There was the shooting of a sheriff's deputy in Palmdale, which is just, I think I don't want this to come off at all as if I'm making light of it because it's a horrific tragedy. I don't think Hollywood screenwriters could have written a more compelling situation that folds in so many of the issues that we're facing now in California politics. LA County District Attorney George Gascon, who was not there when the first press conference was held, Sheriff Robert Luna is there, Catherine Barger is there, all this law enforcement in there, and the DA is not there. And people were talking about that.
Sure.
Then the DA holds a press conference this week where he talks about the murder charges. He is bringing 3 special circumstances which could enhance the punishment against the subject. The young fiance who just gotten engaged to this deputy spoke at this press conference. She is weeping, talking about the fact that they were planning on starting a family together. Now he is gone. It was heart-wrenching. And then moments later, a reporter asks DA Gascon if he will pursue the death penalty. I mean, the timing of it, I get chills
No
up my
wonder he
spine
didn't
thinking about
show
it
up.
now, right?
Yeah.
And I want to take a listen to what Gascon said when asked about the death penalty.
If I thought that seeking the death penalty was going to bring Ryan back to us, I will seek it without any reservation, but it won't. If I thought that the death penalty was going to stop people from committing brutal murders, I will seek it, but we know that it won't. The reality is that the death penalty doesn't serve as a deterrent, and the death penalty does not bring people back.
And Gascon was elected in 2020. This is the pandemic. This is the death of George Floyd. This is massive protests in the streets and a real, groundswell behind a progressive approach to criminal justice. We're now in 2023, almost 2024, the era of smash and grabs, this deputy being shot. I can't help but wonder if George Gascon is going to be able to hold on to that seat, and you don't think so?
I don't think he actually. I think, by the way, that they're still they're still reviewing in court the signatures for the recall, and it does look like they have enough proof to make a very good, solid case that he should have been recalled in the first place.
Yes, this was never to recall George Gascon.
It's a little late, but on the other hand, that isn't going to help his reelection. It's like, hey, don't worry, he wasn't really elected in the first place, so don't vote for him now. And I think there's, unlike a lot of these races, there are a number of very good candidates for DA, both sides.
Yeah.
Even though it's a nonpartisan race. You clearly know who's on which side and who's not.
And 4 of them are deputy district attorneys in his
Exactly.
current office trying to oust their boss, which is just like, that's a pretty
Right.
powerful
Well,
optic
they're
as well.
left a lot of them. I know a lot of them, and because from my work on the death penalty, I challenge him on when he says things like, "I know," and one thing we know for sure is it doesn't work, and blah 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 blah. I know, and the best quote I ever heard was Jerry Brown saying, "I know the people on death row, and there are no innocent people on death row. There's about 700, and if you just look at the top 10, it'll turn your stomach, and you'll never want to talk about it again because you'll be confused." And some of those people agree that they should not be here today, and the methodology of the death penalty is now the same as the Democrats were advocating for and did pass, which is the chemicals used for euthanasia of humans. And that's the same one that is now used for the death penalty. So it's deemed humane. So I want to go back to George Gascon and sort of so I think number one, his credibility as having been put in office is going to be challenged quite legitimately, and I don't think he stands a chance. I also think that the Soros, it doesn't look like Soros is playing in the crime world of California anymore. So he had gone from top of the ticket support,
George Soros
into, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars just in California getting into the local law enforcement races like sheriff and DA, and he was all over the map. He spent $15 million against Anne Marie Schubert alone.
Yeah. Running for attorney general.
He worked against her when she was running for re-election as DA because she was co-chair of the effort on the death penalty. And here you have a lesbian Republican woman that is somehow not going to be workable for crossover votes. So anyway, bottom line is, I think that the people are seeing immediate results now of certain types of legislation. Why is there a spike in, and let me put it in a very nonpartisan way, why is there a spike in pedestrian deaths? Because we passed a law that says jaywalking's legal. Why is there a spike in smash and grabs? Because we passed a law that said that if you steal up to $900, it's a misdemeanor, and the police probably won't even respond in time to give you a ticket, so why bother? Everybody sort of sits down and lets them run away.
Although to push back on that, I just saw the other day $20,000 just in perfume. A lot of the things that are being
that's what you're hearing about in the news.
Yeah,
you're hearing that's what you're hearing about in the news because it's not even noteworthy. The other stuff, you're not going to get a bunch of 7-Eleven guys getting
that's true.
News about the fact that people took off with Snicker bars, or robbed $800 out of their cash register. And then you have, defund the police ramifications that go on. They don't have the bandwidth to go chasing after all of these things anyway. Now, Newport Beach has turned into a war zone, it seems. You can't even get the traffic violations. There are more deaths on PCH now than there ever have been. So people need to start seeing
pendulum swinging again.
It's the pendulum swinging because it just was a bridge too far. Decriminalizing means that there's more free reign. When you blow open the doors at a prison, the chances are, and I know the rate of people recommitting crimes once they get out, but that data is old, and it's not sufficient to talk about what's happening now.
And we're going to have to wrap soon, but before we let you go, as a resident of Orange County, some really interesting stuff that's been happening lately, too, when it comes to elections. And I've been dubbing this the tale of two cities. On the one hand, you have Huntington Beach, your friend there, Mayor Tony Strickland, who's saying, look, you need a driver's license when you get on an airplane. You need a driver's license to when you pick up your meds. You should need to present some sort of identification when you vote. Some people very much on board with that. Some people very much not on board with that. On the other hand, in Santa Ana, you have got these young members of the city council like Jonathan Hernandez who were saying non-citizens make up a huge part of our population. They pay taxes, no taxation without representation. They should be allowed to vote in local elections. And the Santa Ana City Council is moving towards maybe getting this on these are both efforts that could be on the ballot next year. Huntington Beach, Tony Strickland wants in March. I think the Santa Ana one they're looking at November. But it's like, could Orange County get any more purple? You see like the red and the blue and the red and the blue. Talk to me about elections there and what all of this signifies to you.
Yeah. Well, it's not the first time. So I'm going to do something that is, it happened in San Francisco. And San Francisco...
Presenting non-citizens voting.
Non-citizens obtaining elective office.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they wanted to move to actually put it in the legislature, which didn't go anywhere. I would say after listening to that focus group that no one's interested in non-citizens being in elective office, and not in the no party preference.
But can they vote if they pay taxes?
I'm going to be old school about that. There are methods that you can become an American, and we look forward to that. I've worked very hard with a number of people that are either close to me or just that I feel needed a little help pushing things through, that, underserved people. And you go the route, it's like I feel like we need to open up our ability to put people into the system. Yeah. I'm all for that. I'm not for anything that is illegal. And period. End of statement.
And it's killing me because this is such a good conversation too. I guess because we don't have a few moments left. If you can talk to me about what this says to you, that Huntington Beach seems to be moving towards more the right, Santa Ana moving more towards the left, but you're all Orange County.
Yeah, and it's weird because yeah. Well, Orange County is a nation state in and of itself. LA became that, so did San Francisco, and so is San Diego, and their economies are very large scale and growing, mostly because San Francisco, pendulum swinging, is now not a shining city on a hill. Nobody wants to go there. Nobody wants to live there. LA, same thing. We were going to do a billboard that says you are now leaving Orange County for Los Angeles County. Why? And that, yeah. But Orange County has a very, very diverse, but here's the irony of what you just said. As you move east, people are typically more conservative. The beaches are more liberal. That is not the case in what you're presenting right now. And so I would say, remember what I said about no party preference. Time will tell.
Anne Hyde Dunsmore, always a pleasure and honor speaking with you. Thank you for making the trek to Orange County as you had to. Yes, from Orange County.
To LA.
I'll let you go back there.
Why?
That's it for us today. We hope you'll join us here next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alex.
The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Crystal Goss is our producer. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor. The executive in charge of production is Jeff Shore.